You're listening to a free audio download from Venue Cymru's International Concert Series.
Welcome to our New Year edition of pre-concert interviews from Venue Cymru. Returning once more for a joyous and festive concert of Strauss under the direction of Duncan Ward, the Manchester Camerata soar in the new year with soprano Sarah Gabriel. These two young British artists joined us to talk about their careers so far. Sarah, looking at your current season, what really jumps out from your various projects is an interest in as much and as different music as possible. You've performed things from Baroque music to Gershwin, from 18th and 19th century song cycles right through to the 20th century and beyond. Is this a deliberate attempt by you to keep a really broad perspective, or is it just something that reflects your personal interests?
I'm interested in everything. There's a danger, of course, that you can end up being interested in too many things and not focused enough on each of them. But my goal is that with each project that I get the chance to do, that I hurl myself into that era as much as possible and sort of absolutely immerse myself in not just the music of the time, but where possible, the philosophy and the art and what was going on historically. And hopefully by doing all those things, as well as actually learning the music really carefully, then I can get as close as possible to being a temporary expert on that particular area of things. And to me that's very important because I am so excited by different types of music. I do think that each era that I explore feeds my understanding of each other era that I get to perform as well. So I'm quite keen to keep that variety going for now, yes, because I just love everything that I've looked at, from Baroque to things that were written last week. So that feels
good. So you're
good.
Consciously trying to think about the performance aspects each time you go through, you know, if you're thinking about in the historical context. So each time you change repertoire, you think, actually, I've got to approach vibrato, let's say, in a different way, or...
Yes, hopefully. All those elements, vocal quality. For example, I did a musical a while ago, I did My Fair Lady, and even within that piece, the vocal quality changes. That's actually a piece that's based on operetta a lot of the time, and but also it's a musical, and so what you see with the character development is actually a change from quite musical style, I think, to arguably more classical style later, and little bits in between. So it's also often within each project as well, but certainly I wouldn't sing Bach cantatas in the same way. So.
No, indeed. Great.
You're also interested in new commissions and collaborations. Is there a particular objective behind these, or focus that really attracts you?
I love working with composers who are still alive. That's a real joy. Not that I don't like working on composers who aren't alive anymore, but there is a really lovely experience as far as that collaboration is concerned. Often you are given music that's already been written, and that's also an adventure, but what's particularly exciting is being involved in the development stage of a piece, especially if the composer gets to understand your voice, and then you end up with this wonderful experience of a bespoke piece of music that's been stitched specially for you, and that's an incredibly exciting thing to go through. Especially if the composer's developed a good sense of, a good dramatic sense and a good structural sense, and if they work very well with their librettist, then you can have a wonderful experience of having come to the end of the piece together, and that's an absolute joy. It's an incredible feeling.
You're also turning your attention to the big screen. How do you see acting and singing fitting together? Is this an extension of your thoughts on collaborations?
I'd hope that there's no distinction.
Yes.
I think there's a slightly tired old trope that opera singers can't act, which these days I think is pretty much nonsense. I think we get to see some amazing acting on stage. And in actual fact, I think it's probably always been the case. I think it's known that Stanislavski used to go to the Met to see the singers act there. So obviously he was impressed by what singers are able to do as well. So for me, the opportunity to do straight plays, as people seem to call them, has been amazing. And also the film I've done, I think all of those things, again, hopefully contribute to my acting for singing on stage, and not just opera, but also recitals and things as well. And I think the great thing about having done a film is it's very detailed, so you get used to the idea of a difference in scale according to the situation or the venue or the emotional context. So it really contributes to my overall experience of getting used to performing.
Great, thank you. Now Duncan, moving on to you. Not only are you conducting this evening, but you're also a composer, winning the 2005 BBC Young Composer of the Year. Can you tell us something about the competition? I don't think it's very well known for everyone else. How does it compare to the performance side?
It's fairly similar as the BBC Young Musician of the Year. There are, except that you're composing rather than playing, I suppose. Yeah. So rather than turning up and doing your audition, you submit a composition at each stage. I think it's fairly open. It certainly was when I did it. It could be a composition for absolutely anything. I wrote a wind quintet that was called Hopscotch. And I was very pleased when they told me it had been selected, and I went along, and it was performed by a wonderful professional ensemble, the Endymion Ensemble, and which led to more work with them actually. Yeah. And it was on Radio 3, and I had a little interview. It was a long time ago, yeah.
Well, what are we in now, 2014? I just keep forgetting. I've only just got used to 2013, I don't know how I'm going to cope with. Anyway, maybe you can work with Sarah later on, since you're still alive. You know,
can we lock that in now? It's been said on record.
On records.
Yeah. That's it, next year.
And I qualified because I'm still alive.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, that's perfect.
I better take care.
Well, yeah. Unless she changes her taste halfway and thinks, well, dead composers are preferable.
Well, they don't answer back, I suppose.
Do you think you found a style of your own to compose in yet, or do you think that's too much of a limitation?
I think, yes, other people looking at my music would think, that might be a Duncan Ward one, if they've seen several pieces. But it's not something I sit down and think, oh, I must write this like my last one or in my style. And naturally, the context of a commission changes how you'd approach writing a piece. So last year, for instance, the 3 commissions I chose to accept and work on, one was a portion of an opera for a choir of homeless people, a wonderful charity called StreetWise Opera, who put on opera productions with homeless people. Clearly that's going to be a different sort of approach to... hang on a second. What else did I write last year? Ah, a solo accordion work for a Latvian accordionist that was going to be done in Riga. Well, that's a rather different country. And then a short piece for the London Symphony Orchestra. Totally different approaches and sound worlds. And you'd be a fool not to be inspired by the medium that you've got to write for. You know, if you're asked to write an accordion piece and you think, but if only it was a string quartet, you know, then probably they're not going to like it very much and it's not going to be very successful.
I'm glad you brought up StreetWise, because I wondered if you could tell us a little bit more about this project.
Yeah, so this was their 10th anniversary production. They work, they run weekly singing workshops in centres all over the country. In fact, the Cardiff Centre recently started, and any homeless people in the area, in the city, are welcome to come along each week. And what they find, beyond it being a wonderful experience to be singing and acting and working with, is it's perhaps the one place in the week they can go, you know, as a firm commitment, where they turn up and they're treated well, A, as a human being, but B, as a professional artist, and really given some respect, and you know, yeah, worked with as a professional musician. And I really admire this company for the ambition of about once a year they bring all the groups together from the centres around the country, and they put on a big production. And it's not done as a sort of amateur sing-along, not that there's anything wrong with that. It's done as we're going to put on a often new, world-class, artful opera production. They work with some, you know, hugely talented people from the profession. And you know, in a great venue. We were at the British Film Institute, National Film Theatre, 6 nights in London, and that experience, to be involved in part of that, is life-changing for me. Oh, I've just upset my microphone. There we go. But clearly, for the participants to be involved in something like that is a life-changing experience.
Yeah, wonderful. And we're going to move on to Sarah in a minute, because she's got something streetwise as well coming up. But aside from your conducting in various other sort of orchestras around the world, you've also been assistant to a number of fairly high-profile conductors like Simon Rattle, and this season, in fact, you've got Sir Mark Elder at Glyndebourne. And I didn't really know very much about the sort of assistant side, so I wonder if you could tell us a little bit more about.
Sure, it can really vary from conductor to conductor. If you were Bernstein's assistant, for instance, you might hand him his change of shirt in the interval. You'd certainly carry his bag to the airport. If you're a Carrie-Ann's assistant, he had about sort of 4 just following him in a little line. They weren't allowed to say anything, they just walked behind him. Simon Rattle is hugely generous and open and perceptive. So often, especially if it's an opera or something, I'll be sat in the audience, I'll be there with the score, listening for all the things that he might have missed, listening to the balance with the singers, but also then, if I have ideas about the music myself, going up to the singers and working with them on something, going up to individual members of the orchestra, or saying to Simon, "Oh, that's really not working, why don't you try it like this?" The other thing he's great at doing is saying, "You conduct for a bit and I want to go and listen to what it's really sounding like there." One of the worst places to actually listen to what's going on is on the conductor's podium, believe it or not. So Simon, we were doing Gurulida just recently with the Berlin Philharmonic, and I would go and conduct for a while with the choir and the orchestra and the soloists and give him a chance to really hear what was going on. So it can be a number of different things. Or if it's a contemporary work, for instance, a new commission, one of these living composers. Sometimes the great maestri of our age give the job to younger composers, to younger conductors, to do some of the preparatory work and put the piece together, and then they will come in later on.
Sure. Is there some kind of environment of feedback as well from them on, you know, when you take over and do some conducting and then?
Sure, yeah, I've put it all very one-sided, but their support and encouragement and little words of guidance and whatever is obviously hugely inspiring. And
So Sarah, you're also involved in a project of trying to introduce songs and operas from around the world to audiences of all different ages. Can you tell us about this project and also the StreetWise project?
Well, the StreetWise project was a while ago, but it was a hugely inspiring experience, as everybody who says they've worked with, everyone who's worked with StreetWise has that experience. It's just something you never forget. But the person I did that StreetWise project with is a wonderful pianist and animateur and presenter called Dominic Harlan. And Dominic and I have done lots and lots of concerts now for people all over the place, just introducing songs, but really not making a fuss about the idea that they are classical or highbrow. I think that this is an endless debate about the idea of whether or not you are somehow dumbing down or trying to sort of make things too simple or simplistic. But I really love doing projects like that, because what I've noticed is I think a lot of our anxiety about music comes as we grow up. When you're little, you really don't mind. You just hear a tune and you like it or you don't, and more often than not you like it, actually. And that open-mindedness is something that I would love people to either carry on experiencing or to rediscover. One of my most exciting experiences, I think, when I was doing a recital with Dom, it was a children's concert, and we were really anxious because we knew it was just after the interval and that there was going to be a huge sugar rush. And the age range for the concert was supposed to be 10 and above, but we saw toddlers running everywhere, and we were just really slightly anxious because we were singing everything in Russian and German and, you know, all different languages. But we were telling stories around them, and the children were helping to compose songs around them and things. And we did a 4.5-minute German song called The Dwarf, a very gothic, dark story just after the interval when we thought we were going to get the height of the childlike hysteria. And Dominic told the story in English, and then I sang the song in German. And the audience knew somehow, this audience full of children of all ages. I've never heard such silence, and that's the thing about a really magical listening silence, is you can hear that it's silent. And then at the end, they knew something which I think a lot of adult audiences don't know because they're so anxious to make sure they respond appropriately. They somehow knew that the song hadn't finished. Sometimes people think the song finishes when the singer stops, and even my huge ego knows that's not the case. So you should really wait until the pianist finishes, ideally. But the children knew not just to wait until that Dominic had finished playing, but they knew to wait until he'd finished playing and that he had a moment and he lifted his hands from the keyboard and rested them in his lap. And it was just the most inspiring thing, because that was an entirely unlearned response. And that's the feeling I'd like us all to have again, because I think we're told all these shoulds and how you're supposed to behave when you listen to things. And we're very strict about genres and not crossing over the genres and all those kind of things. So that's what I'm sort of quite passionate about, is the idea of that anxiety we all have about the feeling we don't know enough, or we know so little we're not even sure what we're allowed to ask. And I just want to get rid of that and just get as many people along with a glass of wine, if they're adults, obviously, not the children. But that feeling of it just being a more relaxed experience, especially for people who haven't had the chance to come to concerts before.
So, Duncan, you've also been working on a project trying to bring music to people from across the world. You are the co-founder of the Worldwide Appreciation for Music Foundation. Can you tell us a bit about this?
It's a project in India that started when I was 17, and in the summer holiday decided to go and teach some piano, some classical music to some schools down in the very south of India in Kerala. My piano teacher had recently done a tour of India and given some concert masterclasses, and had come back raving about the experience, but said to me that there are schools springing up all over India, but without really the experience to teach that they need, and with a sort of exam obsession, and they're really looking for help, and that I must go someday, maybe when I'm 30 and I have nothing to do, no work. And I said, well, come on, you know, just give me the phone numbers, you know, I'll ring them up. And a month later I was there and had just the most phenomenal time. We were bringing the music to life in these places, getting the children playing ensembles for the first time, getting them improvising. We put on the very first concert some of these kids had ever done for their parents. And as such, when I was going to be leaving, the teachers and the parents said to me, well, you know, what have you done? You know, why are my children so excited about coming to classes? Why are they practicing so hard at home? They've never practiced in their life. And when are you coming back? So I said, well, I'd love to come back next week, but I'm still at school, and I was already composing and conducting and things, and was quite busy. And through a very lucky coincidence, I was playing for some functions for a bank, for Coutts Bank, and I met a wonderful gentleman, Michael Maslinsky, who we got talking about this Indian experience, and it was he who said to me, well, if it was really that good, you should found a charity and you should provide for others to do the same. And so we did. I said, all right, if you help me. And we went round doing all the sorts of things. I learned how much work it is to found a charity. Lots of paperwork and lots of money to raise. But we managed, and the first year we sent out 7 musicians just to Delhi and Kerala, and then year on year it's spread around the country. Each time we go, there's demand for more centres. So now it's in most major cities in India, and not only has that been an incredible voyage itself, but it meant that I got to discover Indian classical music, and was extremely fortunate that the late, great Ravi Shankar, the sitarist, heard about what I was doing and invited me to go and study with him for a summer in California, day in, day out, discovering the ragas and composing together, and yeah, a dream of an experience.
Yeah. Something you can include in your compositions.
Absolutely, if I'm still alive. No, I mean, it's obviously hugely inspiring of everything I do and think about. Yeah.
I've got to ask both of you, since you're doing so many projects in lots of different sort of disciplines, how do you manage to find the time to get this all done?
Sleepless.
Yeah. Sleep smarter. I don't know. I work smarter. Sleep. No, I love sleeping, so I'm afraid I'm not able to sacrifice myself. I do try. I've been trying to wean myself off sleep, but I can't. So I don't know. I was talking to Sam at Manchester Camerata about this the other day, about organising time. I wish I had the answer. Sometimes there's a bit of cramming involved, but also I think in a very joyous way it's hard to switch off as a musician. I think once you realise you can't be anything else, then it's always there. It's always sort of rumbling around in your brain, and a huge amount goes on when you don't think you're thinking about it as well. Yeah. So as long as you have some really focused time, and quite a lot of it, on the things that you're currently obsessing about, and you've got a certain sense of looking ahead, which is obviously very important as well. I, for example, find a huge amount does actually happen when I'm asleep. I wake up the next day and a song's gone in, or something like that. But yes, that's a very rambling response. I don't know how we find the time, but
I think the obsession is the key. That's the word.
Yes.
I think if there's something you want to do enough, you can make time. You know? And that doesn't matter whether it's watching a particular TV episode that you love, or whether it's learning another score tonight. You know, there is. Yeah, where there's a will, there's a way.
It's a little bit easier to set aside the time for watching telly, isn't it?
I don't know, I've never had a telly.
Oh, I don't have a telly either, I'm just imagining. What a dream.
Perhaps we should ask the audience. When you in fact, this is now your chance, ladies and gentlemen. You knew this was coming all night, I'm sure. Catherine's going to come round. If you have a question for our two guests, please throw your hand up in the air. Oh, there's one already. Well done. Because otherwise have to make a New Year's resolution that you'll have to all ask questions next time.
This is a semi-serious question. It's not terribly serious, really. But some contemporary music, including vocal parts, sound like nothing I've ever heard before, like sudden shrieks and groans, etc. I just wonder what you think about it, Sarah.
Well, I remember hearing a story a long time ago about a jeweller called, I think it was Gerald Ratner or something, who announced on national radio that he thought his jewellery was junk. I'd be an absolute fool to say that I think it's a bad thing to have that sort of music going on, because I sing quite a lot of it. And in actual fact, I must say, I really love it. I was at Aldborough, at Snape Maltings, which obviously was where Britain was based for so much of its music, a couple of weeks ago, doing the most extraordinary piece of music I've worked on for a long time. And in the score was not just an orchestra, but descant recorders played by all the instrumentalists at full blast, and some squeaky pigs. And I had a great time, and I think it had a point to it. And I think that provided that the music has some rationale behind it that we can all understand, or we can learn to understand, much as I think if we're sitting at home or we're driving along, we may want to hear something that's tuneful and, you know, uplifting in a way that, in a sort of universally understandable way. There is definitely a place for that music if it's telling us something or reminding us something that perhaps we choose to ignore. I think for me the first discovery of that was Penderecki's Threnody on Hiroshima. Is that the right title?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I heard that for the first time when I was, I don't know, 15 or something, and maybe younger. And I was absolutely, it changed my life, as so much music does change our lives in a tiny little way each day. But it was a very radical experience for me. And of course, he couldn't have written about Hiroshima to him in any other way, because how could you write about that tunefully? So I think it's easy to imagine that some of this music is gratuitously done, and I'm sure sometimes that's the case. But whenever I've sung that sort of music, it always feels like the composer has thought incredibly carefully and felt incredibly deeply about what they're trying to get me to do. I have to look after my voice very carefully when I do that sort of music, but then ideally I'd look after my voice quite carefully anyway, so it's just standard procedure.
Do you think that adds in an extra concern for perhaps new technique with these things?
Yes.
This is now a space for you to actually try and find a different way of getting around the challenges of those pieces.
Yes, I think you absolutely have to have a very, very robust technique in the first place, because the other slight problem with a lot of contemporary music is that because of timescales and budgets, you often end up with much less rehearsal time. It's music that you won't have done before if it's brand new, and it's often really, really hard to learn. You have extraordinary rhythms and unusual pitches and all these unusual demands on the voice. So you have to learn very rapidly and absorb it physically very quickly as well, otherwise you can be in danger of not singing properly. And so, yeah, you have to have the readiness to go with that sort of music, definitely.
Great.
And all music was new once.
Yes.
That's right.
That's right.
And often people were very shocked.
Yes, exactly.
The things we found very beautiful now.
Yes, that's true.
You both travel the world. You're in the States and all over the place in Europe. How do you find working with different ensembles? Duncan, do you think there's a difference between orchestras in Germany in comparison to the UK and even in the States? Do you notice any major differences?
I think nearly every orchestra and ensemble has a unique character and a different environment. Germany is very fortunate in that the classical music is extremely well funded and supported from education down to the professional level, and it means that the orchestras have a lot more rehearsal time and can work very deeply into the music. The nature of working is different. But then yeah, different nationalities and different characters can provide different challenges too. And certainly you're, as a conductor, you're constantly having to be hugely flexible about what's going to get the best out of this particular bunch of people. And quite quickly assessing the character of, well, not quite each and every one, but the general character of the 80 people in front of you. Yeah, it's an exciting dimension. And recently I was working way over in China. I did the Chinese premiere of Peter Grimes in Beijing, and there again, you know, hugely different of culture of working. Some fantastically talented players, quite staggering, but with you know, different things become challenges. And for them, they were facing the music of Benjamin Britten for the very first time. They'd never played a note before. They kept reminding me that Chinese C was very different to English C. So these bleak colours I was, you know, trying to go for in the strings, well, no relation whatsoever. But it meant that, you know, what a fabulous voyage of discovery to get inside that music and see that. Yeah, so it's wasn't a terribly good answer, but yes, orchestras in different countries are very different, and that's an exciting challenge. Yeah.
I'd say it's probably worth saying the same as being adaptable for new repertoires that come up. The same for a conductor. I don't know if any of you have picked this up from previous conductors we've had as guests, but it seems that each orchestra might actually play at a slightly different time in relationship to your movements.
Absolutely, here. Yeah.
Yes, indeed. So I suppose if I want to throw a question in...
We could try, couldn't we?
Yeah.
If I give a downbeat and you all clap. I'd say that was more Portuguese.
Well, you'd imagine it'd be quite off-putting to suddenly go into, say, a German orchestra and have your beat go down, whereas you would have an English orchestra straight there, and then German slightly delayed afterwards. That would be quite off-putting. So.
Yeah, and certainly as a young conductor coming from youth orchestras and amateur orchestras that very much play on your beat or sometimes in front of it, Yeah, so the first orchestra I did have, the professional orchestra, I had the chance to conduct with the London Symphony Orchestra,
Yeah.
in masterclass with Gergiev, and there to give the downbite and wait a second was quite exciting. Oh, it's great. And then of course there's the wonderful story of it's just come to me because of giving the initial downbeat of a concert, but it's a carry-on story, and it was a live broadcast on television, and the first item on the program was Don Juan, and he went on the podium and he closed his eyes. Thinking he was starting the opening of L'après-midi d'une faune. At which point the concertmaster saved his bacon. Perfectly together, fantastic. At which point he stopped. And restarted.
Watch out this evening.
Yeah.
I hope that doesn't happen.
I'm sure it happens. Is there one final question then from the audience? Oh yes, right down here in the front.
Just following on your earlier answer then, so the preparation work in terms of from a non-musical side, so you're working with lots of different players, lots of different countries, so how do you prepare, what sort of background do you have to do to work with that team, and I suppose really what skills do you need that are non-musical to help you?
Oh.
Yeah, it's a very good question. Clearly there are many social skills involved in conducting and engaging with the people in front of you. Certainly if you're going to a culture that you might not be so familiar, you've got to be certainly research and talk to people about the certain customs and cultural traditions of what you should be aware and the way in which you might work. Often it's important to try and learn some of the language. It's respectful for a start, and hugely necessary for it's certainly not the case that everybody speaks English. So yeah, a certain amount of research. Often I find it really very useful to talk to another conductor that might have been to that orchestra before, or even try and make as much contact with the people that you're going to be going to before you go. I went and did a fantastic project down in South Africa last summer, a South African youth orchestra, and there just to make sure I'd really talk to the organisers about the nature of the orchestra and the children involved and how it was going to work. So yeah, certain amounts of homework. Is that the sort of...
Yeah, no.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Well done. Congratulations, ladies and gentlemen, on some excellent questions this evening. And please join me in thanking our two guests.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Enjoy.
Thank you.
Thanks very much.
For more information, please see our website www.venuecymru.co.uk.